Hello everyone and welcome. In this video I'm going to talk about objects and classes, and this is actually the first video of a new series I've been working on about object-oriented programming in Python. So object-oriented programming is a programming paradigm that defends that code should be structured around the notion of classes and objects. So it's just a form of organizing your code. It's just a style of programming. Now, there are actually a bunch of different programming styles that you can adopt. For example, functional programming is one of them, but object-oriented is by far the most accepted nowadays, and it's used very widely in an enormous range of languages. So it's good that you understand it, even if you prefer different styles of programming. Okay, so first of all, what is an object? Well, you actually work with objects in Python all the time. You just don't realize they're objects. Now, an object is basically something that has a limited set of operations that you can perform on it. And these operations are, for example, methods or functions. Now, an object is always associated with a class. So if you print the type of this variable name, so that's what I've done here, print type of name, and I run this code, this is going to give me class, oops, let me just pull my terminal up and run that again. This is going to give me class string. That's because this variable name right here is an object of the class string. So basically what happens when you assign the value of a string to a certain variable, which is what I've done here, you're creating an object of the class string. Now, a string is a built-in class. You don't have to implement it. It's already implemented for you in Python. So you can just use a string and the program will know that it's a string. And the string has a set of methods that you can call on it, right? You can call the split method, you can call the join method, the strip method, the upper, lower, title, etc. Now, these are methods specific to the class string. So these are operations that you can perform specifically on strings. Now, you can't call these methods on an integer, for example, because an integer is an object from a different class, right? It's an object from the class string, integer, sorry. And so it has its own methods associated, and it has its own functionalities. Now, you can actually create your own custom objects with their own methods and their own functionalities. So to do that, you have to create a class. So let me just delete this. So to create a class, I'm going to write class and then the name of my class. And this name is arbitrary, so you can call it whatever you want, but try to give it a descriptive name and preferably use camel case if there's more than one word, okay? So my class is going to be called student, like so. And now inside my class, I'm going to define the functionalities associated with an object of the class students. So let's start simple here. I'm just going to, oops, let me just Okay, so I'm going to define a function. Now, when you define a function inside of a class like this, that's actually going to be called a method. And then you can call that method on an object of that class, but we'll get into that later. So my method is going to be called getGrades, and I'm going, grades, and I'm going to pass in a parameter self. Now, don't worry about the self parameter yet. I'm going to explain this later. So inside this method, I'm just going to print grade. Okay, so now I'm going to create an instance of this class. So I'm going to create an object of the class students. To do that, I'm going to write s1 equals and then students. So this is similar to calling a function, and it's called instantiating a class. So creating an instance of the class. So you'd write the name of your class, in this case students, and then parentheses. Now I've created an object of the class students called S1. So now I can call getGrades on my S1 object because I've defined that to be a functionality applicable to objects of the class students inside of my class. So you do this by calling this method, so s1.getGrades, like so. And now if I run this, you can see that this prints grade, which is what this method does, right? Okay, so I hope that wasn't too hard to understand. Nevertheless, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. And now let's get a bit more complicated. So I'm actually going to define another method inside of my class, and this is going to be the initialization method. So def double underscore init double underscore, and then I'm going to pass in self name age, and then here I'm going to write self dot name, name equals name, and then self dot age equals age. Okay, so this is a dunder method, and the name dunder derives from the double underscores before and after the init keyword. Dunder, right? Double underscore. Now, there are a bunch of dunder methods that you can use, and I'm actually going to make a whole other video just to talk about them because there's so much to say. But basically, what defines a dunder method is that they are called automatically every time you instantiate the class, okay? And you'll see more about that in just a minute. So the parameters are going to be self, and you actually have to pass in self as a parameter in every method you create, and then name and age. So like I said, every time I create an instance of this class, this init method is going to be called automatically, meaning every time I create an object of my class, so every time I instantiate my class, I have to give it a name and an age. So that's what I'm going to do down here in my S1 object. So he's going to be called Mike, and he's going to be 34. Now, before I keep going, let me just explain what self means and what these self.name equals name and self.age equals age are. So self actually refers to the object you're instantiating. So when I write self.name equals name, basically what I'm saying is that the name of the object I'm instantiating, so self.name, is equal to whatever name I give my object when I instantiate it. So this parameter name right here, which I define to be Mike in my object S1. So if I were to create another object, so for example S2 equals student, I would have to define another name, so for example, Mary, and another age, okay? And now I can get only the name or only the age of these students by writing print, for example, s1 dot name and print s2 dot age, for example. And let me just delete that. And now if I run this, you can see that this is going to give me Mike's name and Mary's age. Okay, now I actually want the name and age of my students to be printed within a string, because for now, for example, if I print S1 and I run this, this is just going to give me a student's object at a certain location. And I actually want a string representation of my objects. And luckily for me, there's a dunder method that does exactly that, which is the repr method, which stands for representation. So just to recap, a dunder method is a method that is called automatically every time you create an instance of your class. So down here, I'm going to write def double underscore repr double underscore, and then I'm going to pass in self. And you actually have to pass in self every time you create a new method. And then I just want this to return a nef string that says my name is self dot name, and I am self dot age years old. Okay, so now if I run this, you can see that this is going to print my name is Mike and I am 34 years old instead of this ugly object at a location. But why would you even create a class? I mean, how is this helpful? Well, if you have a bunch of students and you want to assign a name and an age to each of them without using classes, you have to create all of the students separately and then print all of them. And when you create a class, you have a predefined set of functionalities applicable to all your students, and you just have to instantiate it in order to create different students. So classes basically allow us to group functions, making them easily reusable. Okay, so that's it for this video. I hope it was easy to understand. Any questions that you might have, don't hesitate to ask. If this was helpful and valuable to you, please like and subscribe to support the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.